From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you, and here's what's ahead. K-State's Allen Featherstone with us today to discuss farm machinery investments and how accelerated depreciation methods can serve to reduce the cost of that machinery. That was the subject of a new analysis that he covered at the recent K-State Risk and Profit Conference. Then K-State's Brian Briggeman will look at the economic state of agricultural cooperatives in Kansas currently, drawing from discussions at the recent K-State Cooperative Leadership Symposium. Brian reports that the cooperative system is in a good place economically right now. And on this week's horticulture segment, K-State's Ward Upham with pointers on seeding or overseeding a cool season lawn. All that and more here on Agriculture Today. Thanks for listening in. You're tuned to Agriculture Today. First off today, we'll draw from information that was passed along at that recent K-State Risk and Profit Conference, hosted, as always, by the Agricultural Economics Department here at K-State. And this session looked at machinery investments and the opportunity for producers who buy machinery to make use of accelerated depreciation in managing those investments. And joining us now as one of the presenters of that, Allen Featherstone, agricultural economist from K-State. Before we dive into this topic, farmers are now, Allen, in a position to invest in new equipment because of the general health of the agricultural economy, are they not?
That is correct. Given the profitability of the sector for 2021, and then given the income situation for 2020 with the COVID payments, certainly there is an increased ability for farmers to think about replacing machinery lines as needed in their operation.
And they have at their disposal, thanks to actions by Congress, the accelerated depreciation methods. Explain what's out there, if you would.
There's really two methods out there that farmers can take advantage of. One is the Section 179 depreciation, and the other is bonus depreciation. Section 179 was designed to help small and medium businesses by essentially reducing the cost of investment by allowing an expense to be taken in many times up to the full purchase price of the asset in the year that it was purchased. And this was essentially for purchased, financed, leased, new, or used equipment. The way that works is Congress over time has had different deduction limits in terms of the amount of the deduction that farmers can take per year. Then there's also been purchase limits with regards to the maximum total investment in a year. And if you would end up going above that maximum limit in purchases, then there would be a dollar-for-dollar reduction of the deduction once you reach that limit. The other aspect there is bonus depreciation. This is used to accelerate depreciation in many of the same ways. This has been more sketchy in terms of whether or not it's been available or not. Some years it's available. Some years it maybe has a 50% allowance. Some years it has a 100% allowance. And so the bonus depreciation has changed much more with regards to the availability than the Section 179. This must be claimed within the first year of the asset's use. Originally, it was applied to new assets, but this was modified in 2017 under the Trump tax bill such that used assets would also qualify for bonus depreciation. The other benefit of bonus depreciation is that it does allow businesses with a net loss to deduct depreciation and carry the loss forward. Section 179, if you had a loss that year, you would not be able to take advantage of the 179. And the key component with regards to bonus depreciation is it allows those businesses that are larger, have more income, to be able to get some of the benefits that are in the Section 179.
So these tools are out there. Producers could take advantage of one or the other as they ponder a new purchase, and in some cases a purchase of used equipment here. What was the intent of your analysis as you looked at the impacts of those options?
One of the key concerns is whether or not bonus depreciation methods or accelerated depreciation methods encourage maybe overinvestment in agricultural machinery, and whether or not that puts producers in a difficult financial situation down the road. And so that was one of the key components that we were looking at. And the other component is just understanding how widely this is used. Again, we're using a sample from the Kansas Farm Management Association, and the key thing is just trying to understand how widely this has been used by Kansas producers. We did go back and look at 2014 to 2019 is the study window, and so we have a little bit of time to track producers over time and the use of the accelerated depreciation methods.
Well, let's look at that latter objective first. How widely accelerated depreciation is employed? What did you discover?
Looking at those that used Section 179 and bonus depreciation, in some respects, this would match what you would expect in terms of when incomes are high, there was more use of it. When incomes are low, there's less use of it. But back in 2014, when incomes were pretty high, the average farmer used $45,000 worth of Section 179. And again, what that means is some farmers used a lot more, some didn't use any. From a bonus depreciation perspective, the number was much smaller, probably 2,000 to 3,000. But that has climbed with regards to bonus depreciation. In 2018, 2019, that jumped up to about $8,000 worth of bonus depreciation. And again, it's very lumpy. And then with regards to Section 179, that actually decreased to a low of about $22,000, $23,000 in 2016. And in 2019, the most recent year, it was right at $30,000.
Then the other question, will the use of either of these depreciation methods lead to potential overinvestment in machinery?
Yeah, what we ended up doing there is we traced farms that we had records for each year, 2014 through 2019, and then we matched that with a more complete financial data aspect. And so we're able to trace 518 farms over this period of time. Looking at that, we found some interesting results. For example, when we look at the Section 179 deduction, farmers that used that more had a lower working capital ratio. And so certainly when you see that up front, that's a little bit of a warning sign indicating that those that invest more in machinery and take advantage of the Section 179 did have a lower working capital. And so that was statistically significant. But if we look at it with regards to the probability of default, we have something that in some respects really goes against what the common wisdom was, that that would cause farmers to be more at risk. Essentially, those that used more Section 179 deduction were actually having a lower probability to default, and so they were actually safer. And so part of it is it could be that those farmers that have a lower probability to default invest more than those that have a higher probability to default. But either way, the result is almost opposite what you would think. And so from that perspective, that's a positive. And then those that use Section 179 depreciation had a higher ability to pay off capital debt. And again, that would alleviate some concerns, kind of saying that they're over-investing and so they don't have that ability to pay off debt. And then the other aspect is that those that use more Section 179 ended up having a lower debt-to-asset ratio. And so, again, the preponderance of the evidence is that farmers are probably making very appropriate use of this accelerated depreciation, that they're not over-investing in order to take the deduction and lower their taxes, that they are making consideration of where that asset is going to fit into the business and how that will be paid back over a period of time. Certainly the fact that you don't see those individuals that have a higher use of Section 179 having a higher debt-to-asset ratio, and so they're not increasing the debt to a level where the farm is not safe from a long-term perspective. With regards to bonus depreciation, there really wasn't anything that was statistically significant. And so certainly the signs were somewhat consistent with the Section 179 depreciation results, but there wasn't anything statistically significant.
This really serves as a testimony to good management on the part of producers out there in the main, but they need to continue to be cognizant of the possibility of overextending at some point, don't they?
Yeah, certainly it is reflective of good management. Probably the other aspect that I think is important to recognize is from a policy perspective, sometimes policymakers worry of whether or not there's unintended consequences of policy enacted. At least in the case of accelerated depreciation from a farm perspective, I think this study should alleviate those concerns that it is a tool for those that are making machinery investment. It does lower the cost and does help to recapitalize the production agriculture sector, and there doesn't appear to be any evidence that it's leading to purchasing behavior that leads to difficult financial situations down the road.
Well, it's good to report that, and it's an interesting analysis. Allen, we appreciate you going over this with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Once more, he was one of several agricultural economists here at K-State who inspected the impact of accelerated depreciation on machinery investment decisions by Kansas agricultural producers. Agricultural economist Allen Featherstone of Kansas State University there. We'll be back. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Welcome back. You are tuned in to Agriculture Today. Just a few weeks back now, the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center here at Kansas State University hosted its annual Cooperative Symposium for agricultural cooperative representatives, officials, and otherwise. That took place here in Manhattan, and we haven't spoken with the director of that center since that event, so we brought him by today to find out what's happening on the cooperative front. Brian Briggeman from the Agricultural Economics Department at K-State is with us once more. Just a quick review of this symposium, Brian. This is a gathering where those who manage cooperatives, those who may represent cooperatives as farmers, can get together and kick around what's going on in this sector, right?
That's right, Eric. So the Leadership Symposium, as it's called now, we partner closely with the Kansas Cooperative Council on designing this program and rolling it out primarily to Kansas farmer cooperative directors, employees, as well as service providers to co-op. Really, it's open to anybody who's interested in it. So it's just a chance to come and gather, hear from speakers, talk about current issues facing cooperatives. So yeah, it was a great day, had a great attendance and a lot of wonderful discussion.
When you mention issues, what surfaced in those discussions, in those presentations specifically? Were there one or two or three things there?
Sure. So one of the things that we did talk about was just labor issues that continue to face cooperatives, finding good labor, recruiting, retaining talent. You know, you see on the news and you probably, as you drive around, you see plenty of help wanted signs. Co-ops are, for a long time, have been kind of facing these challenges. The way I like to think about it is, you know, there are great jobs out in rural America, great jobs at a cooperative. It's just finding those people who want to live out in more remote areas and be there. So I know many of the cooperative leaders that were there talked various strategies and different ways to approach it and how they can make sure that they can recruit and retain talent for the future.
And did they come upon any revelations there?
No, I mean, nothing as far as, you know, the silver bullet, if you will. But definitely, you know, just talking about different ways of How do we go to the right place to recruit, for example? I know a number of cooperatives in the state of Kansas use the H-2A program to bring in, for example, workers from South Africa. I know a number of co-ops have used that program in that way. So I wouldn't view it as so alarming that it's going to cause a disruption in the upcoming harvest. That's not the case at all. But it's just a challenge that co-ops continue to face.
And it's something that maybe advances in technology can aid with, but that can't be the total solution to a labor shortage.
No, certainly. I mean, you have plenty of advances in load in, load out times, looking at how fertilizer warehouses are managed, looking at spraying, looking at just trucking. I mean, there's that technology, the efficiency, the investment that has happened has greatly benefited co-ops and also, too, their farmer owners in the state of Kansas. Mm-hmm.
One thing this symposium allows, Brian, year upon year, is folks to get a finger on the pulse of the economic health of our agricultural cooperatives in Kansas. If one uses commodity prices as a litmus test, if you will, that's probably a favorable report, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, so as we look out ahead, of course, cooperatives typically operate on a fiscal year end, so that may or may not coincide with the end of the year. So it all kind of is rolling at the moment. But for this 2021, early 2022 looks to be very solid. One real quick gauge to understand the financial position of the cooperative industry is how are farmers doing? Farmer cooperatives are owned by farmers, so that business model attaches them that way. And I think many people on your program and reports that you read, the agricultural economy is doing quite well at this time. So the near-term outlook for co-ops right now is very positive. Looks to be some pretty strong net incomes coming here in the near future.
Any obstacles out there to that income picture, though, or that financial picture?
Well, one of the things that has happened with the commodity price run-up is many of these cooperatives are in a hedged position on the futures market. So with those positions, and when we have commodity price volatility and changes in that, a number of margin calls have to be met. And this is, as I think about it, for U.S. agriculture, our comparative advantage that we have over just about anybody else in agriculture across the world is our access to debt capital. Our financial system is quite strong. A great case in point of that is the Farm Credit System, which is a financial cooperative. And for many of these farmer co-ops, CoBank is their primary lender, which CoBank is part of the Farm Credit System. And those, I know many extensions and many short-term loans being provided to these cooperatives so that they can finance those margin calls. Because as they move through and then they lift that position, that will only help and benefit them even more. So that's certainly a challenge. I know talking to many of the cooperative leaders at the symposium, they just kind of head spins a little bit when you think about everything that had to happen in order to meet those margin calls. But they did, and it looks like, could really translate into some really profitable years.
Well, then, are cooperative leaders preparing for contingencies? That is to say, when a downturn occurs, and it undoubtedly will, one would think, at some point, not that we're welcoming that, but that's the nature of the beast, are they positioned now to absorb that change?
Right. So that is the other thing. As we're in a high right now as far as the agricultural economy, you're right, it's likely going to come down at some point in time. Not sure when. But one of the things, as I work with farmers and talk to farmers, in these times of prosperity, you need to be building up your balance sheet. Focus on things like liquidity, building up a solid equity base so that if a loss occurs, you can absorb it. Or maybe an opportunity comes up as the ag economy comes down and you can expand or do some sort of growth project. Same thing for co-ops. So some recent research that a graduate student and I have been working on, the long and short of it is we looked at doing a stress test of farmer cooperatives here in the Midwest. So
Explain
Kansas.
that.
Yeah. So here in Kansas too. So the stress test was to say, let's shock bad debt expense. Let's just say that something happens, the ag economy falls off. Can co-ops absorb those losses? So they have to write off a bunch of accounts receivable, essentially. Look at it that way. And the big finding that we found is that cooperatives' balance sheets are very strong right now. Very few co-ops would experience significant losses to where they would actually have to be drawing down their equity levels drastically. That is actually a really positive thing. And that the data that we are using doesn't account for this big year that many are projecting, here in the near term. So I would, guess and project that stress test, if we were to run it with this year's numbers, would look even better. So co-ops have really spent a lot of time building up their liquidity levels to absorb those short-term losses, also have sizable equity positions as well. So all of that is, kind of brings stability to agriculture, which is very important. Cooperatives, especially grain storage across Kansas, we just recently updated, and we talked about that before, but just under 50% of all that grain storage out in the state of Kansas is tied to a co-op. Right. So it's very important for these cooperatives to be financially healthy, be able to be in a position to be there for the long run.
So putting it succinctly, our cooperatives in Kansas are being practical with their prosperity.
Right, correct. Yes, being practical with it, building up the balance sheet, having that liquidity levels to absorb losses, but also to, if there are any investment opportunities or ways to expand as well.
And anything else exciting on the horizon, expansion-wise in the sector?
Well, there's always this continual discussion of consolidation that has occurred through the state of Kansas. Back in 1950, I believe we had right at about 360 farmer cooperatives. Today we have 62. And as managers of these co-ops retire, the board of directors, sits down and looks at all opportunities. Do we hire a new manager? Do we look to do a merger? Do we join one of these LLC structures that are out there? What do we want to do? But one thing we haven't heard much of here for quite a while is a forced merger, right, where there's financial stress on that cooperative and where they need to consolidate because of issues. No, these mergers today are really being well thought out, thinking strategically about what we should be doing and what's best for our farmer owners.
That's a positive that emits once again from good times in agricultural production right now. Mm-hmm. Good update, Brian, as always. Thank you for the comments right here.
Thanks, Eric.
He is the director of the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center in the Agricultural Economics Department here at K-State. Brian Briggeman with a few thoughts on the state of agricultural cooperatives and playing off of some of the discussions at that recent Cooperative Leadership Symposium here at Kansas State. You're listening to the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. Now in its 97th year of broadcasting, this is the K-State Radio Network, and you're tuned to Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Now today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. The EPA wants a second look at its 2019 decision to grant 31 small refinery exemptions to the renewable fuel standard for the year 2018. This after the Supreme Court ruled this summer against a federal appeals court ruling back in 2020 that favored the ethanol industry. On June the 25th, the Supreme Court overturned a unanimous ruling by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit in Denver. The Supreme Court ruled that small refiners, such as Holly Frontier and others, can receive extensions of their exemptions to the RFS, even if their earlier exemptions had lapsed. Now the EPA is asking the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit to send that exemption decision back to the agency for review. Agriculture and biofuels groups that petitioned the court to consider the case are pressing the court to remand and vacate the decision. Those groups include the Renewable Fuels Association, Growth Energy, American Coalition for Ethanol, the National Corn Growers Association, and the National Biodiesel Board. The USDA's upcoming crop forecast will come from more than just what farmers expect their yields will be, as we hear now from the USDA's Gary Crawford.
While many of us will be taking off work enjoying the Labor Day weekend, hundreds of USDA expert crop enumerators are going to be out on farms finishing up objective yield evaluations of crops for the upcoming USDA crop production report. Lance Honig with the USDA Statistics Service told us evaluators are going to be looking at 7,800 field plots of corn, soybeans, and cotton, first checking the maturity level of those crops.
Since things do vary so much across the country, we need to make sure that we're making the appropriate counts for where that crop is in the development process. They'll count the number of plants. If it's corn, eventually they'll be counting the number of ears.
And in places where the crops are further along,
they'll actually be harvesting fruit from these plots within the field, sending them off to our laboratory in St. Louis where we can actually weigh, take some further measurements.
All of these objective measurements, plus satellite data, plus a yield survey of 9,000 farmers, will go into USDA's crop production report. It comes out September 10th. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
And, of course, we'll be taking a look ahead to that USDA report with K-State grain market economist Dan O'Brien during his weekly segment here tomorrow. Kansas Team Beef was well represented recently during a time-honored event. Scarlett Higgins tells us here that team has grown significantly over the last 3 years and now is an established program with brand recognition for runners and cyclists here in the state.
About 20 Kansas Team Beef members joined more than 2,000 athletes from across the globe in the oldest and arguably one of the most difficult continually held marathons in the U.S. Since 1956, runners have been summiting one of Colorado's most famous mountains in the Pikes Peak Marathon and Ascent. While running half and full marathons, competitors endure a relentless 7,800-foot climb. A few brave individuals even compete in the double ascent, running both races for a total of 39.9 miles and 15,000 feet of climbing in 2 days. Amidst a field of world-class runners, Kansas Team Beef members held their own, with one member placing third in his age division, another placing seventh, and two successfully completing their third double ascent. According to Kansas rancher and Team Beef member Jake Panbacker, it's one thing to say beef is nutritious, but it's an entirely different thing to actually see people relying on that nutrition to do truly exceptional things. He said that makes the Checkoff-funded Team Beef program one of the best tools to demonstrate beef can be part of a healthy and active lifestyle, whether you're trying to be the best version of yourself or literally running up the side of a mountain. Kansas Team Beef has more than 900 members who compete in everything from the local 5K to international races like the Boston Marathon. Members fuel their training with lean beef and pass a knowledge quiz about beef's nutrition and how it is produced so they can share the information with others. I'm Scarlett Higgins.
And time now for this week's edition of the Kansas Soybean Update. With that is Greg Akagi. Greg?
Gail Keyser is joining us. He is a soybean producer out of Garnett and is a committee member for the Kansas Soybean Yield and Value Contest, and it is open for those who are interested, Gail, to be a part of this contest.
That's correct.
What is this contest designed to do?
Well, it's just to promote the soybean industry and I guess just a little friendly competition amongst the producers. And we hope that everyone will get excited about it and join in on the program.
So if people are interested, and I know there are several producers that are out there who are a part of this, how do they enter the contest and what information do you need specifically?
Well, I guess best would be just to go to the Kansas Soybean Association phone number, which is 785-271-1030. And they can give you the information that you need and the forms. And I think even this year we've gone to a digital process, so they can give you all that information.
And, of course, they can go to the website as well at kansassoybeans.org. The entries, when are they due?
December 1st.
And you also get to see, too, throughout all this, how impressive some of these soybean producers are in Kansas as far as some of the numbers they end up getting. It's very impressive to see. Oh,
that's correct. The last few years we've had, I think, 3 entries that were over the 100-bushel mark. Last year's entry made 114.13 bushels to the acre.
As far as the contest, is it still, as far as the reporting districts are concerned, that we normally see across the state?
Yes, it's same districts, and, of course, there's the 4 categories of conventional till, dryland, conventional till, irrigated, no-till, dryland, and no-till, irrigated.
And I know for the work for the Commission Soybean Association, you've got a lot of thanks as far as there are people that assist in conducting the contest as well.
Well, that's right. It takes quite a few of us. And, of course, there's 7 members on the yield contest committee, and we'll meet shortly after the deadline and go over the entries. And, of course, we have to divide them up into the different divisions in the state, which there are 8 of them, and then we'll figure out the yield.
And once again, those entries are due December 1st. You can get more information at kansassoybeans.org. Gail, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Greg.
That is Gail Keyser, who is a committee member on the Kansas Soybean Yield and Value Contest, and he joins us on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission.
Thanks, Greg. And last call here for registering for that Soil Health Field Day, co-sponsored this evening by K-State. It'll take place at Knopf Farms, Gypsum, Saline County, and it'll be a great program. If you go to kscorn.com/tour, you can still register. kscorn.com/tour. This is Agriculture Today. This Agriculture Today comes to a close, covering the field of horticulture once again, and the specific topic today, seeding or overseeding that home lawn this fall. This is a traditional project that we see around and about, and with some tips on succeeding there, Ward Upham, horticulturist with K-State Research and Extension. And Ward, what we're referring to here is a cool season lawn, exclusively at this time of the year. Right?
That's right.
And in the case of either seeding or overseeding, site preparation is task number 1.
That's right. So we have different machines that can prepare that seed bed in a way that will help ensure you have good success in what you're doing. First is a verticut. A verticut is a machine that has notched blades that'll cut a furrow in that soil. If you're a farmer, it's like a drill. Okay, so it cuts those furrows, and then you come back later and broadcast the seed so it falls in those furrows. This is different than a power rake. Power rake has little hammers that will swing, and this doesn't. The verticut, that blade is firmly attached so it cuts a furrow. So 2 different machines, and sometimes when you rent it, you have to make sure you get the right one because sometimes these guys don't know the difference between the 2.
Ask questions by all means.
Yes, so you look at that machine, make sure that it has solid blades that are notched that will cut a furrow. The second is a slit seeder. Same thing as a verticut, except it has a seed hopper. And so instead of coming back later to broadcast a seed, it does everything in one operation. And really, among the 3 that we're going to talk about, this is my favorite one because it's quicker, just because you already have the seed hopper right there. The third is a core aerator. Now, core aerator has some advantages. I like the other 2 better if you have a regular situation. But if you're on a slope, core aerator is going to work better because that seed is going to fall in those holes, and it's less likely to wash out. Also, when that seed falls in those holes, it's less likely to dry out as quickly. Therefore, if you have limited water, you may want to go with a core aerator. Thing with a core aerator is you need to go over that area probably at least 3 times in order to have enough holes that it's going to fill in. Second thing, if you do have a slope, it has to be a mild enough slope that you can safely core aerate it. And so if all that happens, then the core aerator is a good choice in those situations.
And those are the 3 to select from. You don't have to do all 3, but pick one that fits your planting conditions and your situation more aptly, and either the verticut, slit seeder, or core aerator. Once you've done that, once you've readied that soil, Ward, overseeding, first of all, and this has a direct purpose, right?
Yeah, what you're trying to do is just thicken up the lawn. The lawn is in fairly good shape, but it needs thickened up. And so you're going to save that existing grass. Now, the first step in that is to scalp the lawn. What that means is you're going to cut it very short and bag those clippings and get rid of them. You're trying to open up that soil so that when you cut those slits, or put in those cores, that you're going to get good seed-soil contact. Regardless of what you do, you have to have good seed-soil contact. So once you get it scalped and get all that material off the lawn, you need to fertilize. Now do that according to a soil test, or if you don't have time to do a soil test, just use a starter fertilizer at the rate suggested on the bag. And then the next step is going to be actual seeding.
And when you get around to the seeding, you want folks to pay a little attention to the rate at which they're putting that seed down.
That's right. You don't use a full rate. Now, full rate for tall fescue is going to be 6 to 8 pounds per 1,000 square feet. You're going to cut that in half. And so about 3 to 4 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Kentucky bluegrass is going to be, full rate is 2 to 3 pounds. So you're going to go with 1 to 1.5 pounds of seed per 1,000 square feet. You use less Kentucky bluegrass seed because it's a much smaller seed. The actual seed per square inch is about the same. After you get that done, then you're going to water, and you have to keep that soil moist. Now, if it was a day like we've had in the recent past where it's 100 degrees, you'd be watering 3 times a day. Now, probably twice a day is going to be enough. You just need to keep that soil moist, but you don't need to waterlog it. And so about 10 minutes per area is all you're going to need. Now, once we get later in the season, if you don't get this done, right away, then the amount of time between waterings is going to increase. You may only have to water once a day or maybe once every 2 days. But that soil needs to stay moist until that grass comes up. And then you slowly back off. Don't stop. Right. People sometimes make that mistake is they'll completely stop once it comes up. You have to gradually slow down how often that you water. And so what you're going to be looking at is as that grass starts to grow, if you step on it, it doesn't pop right back up, it needs water. If it does, then you're okay for now. But watch it closely. You can gradually back off until you get maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, depending on what the weather does.
Stay on top of that. That's your most important management step in starting that new overseeding. Now, for beginning from scratch with a full-fledged seeding of the lawn, the seeding rate will change, of course. But what else is different here?
You have 2 options when you're starting over. One is you're starting with bare soil. If you're completely going in with bare soil, then you're ready to go with the seeding operation. However, if you have grass that you had to kill out because of such bad shape, then you need to scalp. Just like you did with overseeding, you need to scalp, get rid of all that excess material, and then come in and do your soil test or your starter fertilizer at the rate suggested on the bag. Come back and you're going to seed at the full rate in this case. So for tall fescue, it's going to be 6 to 8 pounds. For Kentucky bluegrass, 2 to 3 pounds per 1,000 square feet on each of those. And so make sure you have enough seed, but not too much. Too much is just as bad as too little because those young grass plants compete with one another and it weakens them. And so be sure to follow that suggested rate. And then again, that last important step is to water enough to keep that soil moist.
It sounds like a fair amount of management here, Ward, but all of these steps are absolutely essential to establishing that fescue or that bluegrass in the fall. This will set the tone for the remainder of that lawn's life, basically, right?
It certainly will. And the other thing to keep in mind is the amount of time that's required to get that grass seed up is going to depend on temperature as well as the type of seed. Tall fescue I've had up at this time of year in 4 days. Now, once you get further into September, it may be 7 to 10. However, on bluegrass, if you have it up in a week, you're doing really well even at this time of year. And it's going to be more like 10 to 14 once we get a little bit further into September. So don't give up if it doesn't come up right away. It's going to take a little bit of time.
Follow these guidelines on succeeding with an overseeding or a fresh seeding of a cool season lawn here in the fall. Ward, thank you for coming over, as always.
You bet.
On this week's horticulture segment, that's horticulturist Ward Upham of K-State Research and Extension. And with that, our time is away once again. Thanks, as always, for tuning in. Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.